We are back. We are back. We are live. It's your man Sean P coming through with the Sean P experience. Sitting with the Griot. I have another amazing, exciting guest lined up. Couldn't wait to get this show, The Fashion Killer. I've been bragging about this book for about a year now to all my friends. They're tired of me talking about it. You see it. You can't miss it, right? So before we get going, let me give the official introduction. Our wonderful, esteemed guest. Check, check. Oh, we here? Okay, I thought I froze. Here we go. So we have Miss Sowmya Krishnamurthy, journalist, cultural critic, and author of Fashion Killa. She is a music industry veteran whose work can be found in Rolling Stone, Billboard, Double XL, Playboy, Complex, New York Magazine, Village Voice, and The Time. She is the author of Fashion Killer, How Hip Hop Revolutionized High Fashion. She has a forthcoming book coming out, Rockefeller Records, an American rap dynasty. God love the rock. She's an on-air host, a pop culture expert with appearances on radio, TV, and podcasts such as Breakfast Club, MTV, MSNBC, VH1, E, BET, CNN, NPR, and more. Thank you very much for being on the Sean P Experience.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So I got to start with a little fun question. Tell me back in the 90s when you were coming up, you were growing up, Michigan, I understand. What were some of your favorite brands to rock back in the day? Even if you couldn't really get it, but something you was eyeing all the
Well, I have a great story in the book about really being a fan of Tommy Hilfiger. Like a lot of young women, we're big Aaliyah fans. I think I tried to wear my hair over my eye for a while. Like you couldn't see, but it looked really mysterious in middle school. So, of course, I could not afford the red, white, and blue. It was a little expensive at the time. So I ended up getting a knockoff Tommy Hilfiger shirt, but his name was written in cursive, so you couldn't tell it was misspelled. So that's kind of sort of my relationship of hip hop and fashion. It's the idea of just being a kid growing up and watching music videos and reading magazines like Vibe and Double XL and The Source and leafing through the album booklets and seeing how fashion really was that visual connector. And for those of us who didn't get to grow up in places like New York or LA or Atlanta, fashion was like a small way to feel like you were a part of this larger thing called hip hop.
time. Yes, ma'am. Sure, sure. And I totally relate to that being a child of the 80s and the 90s myself. We'll get to that
I
part later
also
on.
know you called me ma'am. So does that mean I'm older than you? Are we the same age? Like it's just a Southern thing?
Well, I think it's a Southern thing. I show all people respect, first of all. I don't want to guess a lady's age, but I'm 42. I'm 42.
Okay, so I'm technically younger than you, so I would not be a ma'am, but keep going. I just had to ask.
You know what's funny? Only my New York guests ever even checked that or catch that. My last two guests, they were like, "Wait a minute, ma'am, we need ma'am." I'm like, my
Right.
grandparents, my grandparents raised me the way I am, right? No,
Absolutely.
I was saying, being here in Louisiana, I want the guests to always remember the time frame you're writing about with hip hop. Everything was so regional, like
Yeah.
music and clothing. So I love in
Yeah.
your book how you breaking down the chronology with the dates when Dapper Dan started doing this and certain other labels started doing certain things. Because in my mind, looking back on it, I didn't realize like, wow, Biggie Smalls was wearing that way back then. Like I didn't realize Jay Z wore that back then because I was
Yeah,
only getting
Biggie was
certain
wearing
things.
Bape in like
Yeah,
'97, which is
yeah.
crazy because a lot of us think of Bape during the streetwear era, but I have a great story of how Big, in an interesting way, wore Bape back in '97, right before he passed, actually. And the photographer who took the photo, his estate so graciously offered to include the photo in the book. But yeah, Sean, I mean, for me, it was showing the 50-year retrospective. So just like as the backstory, books take a long time to write. So from start to when you see it on the shelf is almost like 3 years. For some people, it's even longer. So I knew I wanted the book to drop in 2023 because it was going to be Hip Hop 50. So because of that, I really was very mindful that I wanted to show from 1973 all the way to 2023. And I also wanted to show the how expansive the story is. Of course, New York centric, in that New York
Yeah.
is the Mecca, it's the birthplace. We go into Harlem with Dapper Dan, make a trip to Brooklyn to see what was going on with artists like Biggie and Little Kim and Jay and all of that. But it was also important to look outside of New York. And sometimes hip hop stories, especially sort of the OG stories, they neglect the West Coast, they neglect the South. And when we talk about fashion, especially luxury fashion, of course, we have to go to Paris, right? The home of haute couture. We have to go to Japan to talk about streetwear. So it was really important for me to show just how global this story was, even from jump, right? Now, of course, hip hop is a very global, multi-billion dollar industry, but this fashion story has always had this very sort of universal element to it.
Yes, sure. So I love reading the whole entire publication. I pride myself on that. And I love the acknowledgement section in a lot of books. You mentioned in the acknowledgments your father. You give him credit for your writing. So tell us about your father's impact on your writing work.
I think you are the first person to ask about the acknowledgement. So, bonus credit to you because, yeah, acknowledgements in a book are so analogous to what the thank yous were in a CD back in the day. And I remember as a kid opening up like a Jay Z record and then reading who was he thanking? Okay, who is this tie tie guy? That must be his friend because he names him up front. Okay, who is this person? That must be his lawyer because that person sounds important. Like, the acknowledgments and thank yous were such a window into who the artist and the creator is. Going back to your question, so growing up, I mean, my dad always wanted to be a writer. So when he was younger, he had written poetry. It had actually been published, some of his things in India and like some newspapers there. But like a lot of people, he had to go get a good ass job at some point, and he ended up going into the sciences, and now he's a professor. But as a kid, he was the father who's quoting like Keats and Wordsworth and T.S. Eliot. Like, those are things that were just a part of my lexicon growing up. Even though I did grow up in sort of like the scientific, analytical household, the fact that we had the huge dictionary sitting on the coffee table and I would leaf through and look at all of the big words because I liked using big words even as a kid. There was some like power in language. And for me, my very first paid writing gig was as a writer, a student writer in high school for the Kalamazoo Gazette, which was my hometown newspaper. And that was something that my dad's encouraging. Like, he was really pushing me, like, you're a great writer, you're a great communicator. This is something that you should do. So I think a lot of the written word comes from him. Of course, my mom, took us to the library every week. To this day, she's a voracious reader. If I read
Hmm.
something in book club, I usually send her the book after and then we discuss it. So she's someone who's always kind of on top of current fiction. So just growing up in a house with books, with respect for English and the written word, I think as a kid, you soak it up as a sponge. And I was someone who always gravitated towards English. Like, I was good in school, I had a 4.0, like school came pretty easy to me, but the liberal arts, like English and history and communication, is always where my heart was.
Before we transition, I love talking about libraries a lot lately because I don't think a lot of emphasis enough is put on libraries. In the area where I live at, the library is always like empty. And I'm always ranting and raving about why aren't we utilizing these services and these wonderful buildings. So tell us the importance of libraries to you and your opinion.
Libraries are so important. Of course, they are sort of an epicenter of community. But for a lot of people, I mean, definitely for me growing up, we couldn't afford to buy books. So the library was like this treasure trove. And as a kid, I'll never forget being so excited with the first time I got my own library card. So I think you could check out like 7 books. So I wanted the biggest, like fattest books. I wasn't going to read all of them, but it was this idea of being able to take these books home, having the responsibility to take care of them, bring them back. I think for kids that's so important. And it's just this idea that books can take you anywhere. I mean, now we have the internet and you can just kind of Google what a place looks like or watch a YouTube video or a TikTok. But books open up your imagination. I mean, I'm reading a book now for book club, completely unrelated. It's like hip hop or anything. And it's like this sort of modern sci fi with like the main protagonist is a girl who's an alien. Like books can still take us sort of beyond, I think, what even sometimes the visual can, because it forces our imagination. What does that character look like? How would they be dressed? How would they act? Like it just opens up your mind. I think libraries are so valuable because it just democratizes the literary world. Because I get it, not everybody can afford to buy books, or have access to things like bookstores. So they're incredibly important. And shout outs to all the libraries who have stocked Fashion Killa. I've spoken at a few libraries, done some signings. Like it's always a treat to go into a library and just connect with just like the people in the community.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I love a great origin story as a writer myself. I love asking my authors, like, what was the aha eureka moment? Where it's like, you know what? I'm gonna do a book about hip hop and fashion. You could have written about anything. So why your first book being Fashion Killa?
So it's a hip hop origin, like my origin story and my villain origin story. Are those the same thing?
Yeah, yeah. Let's do it. The villain origin story. Let's
I
do
was
it.
kidding.
I
I was
love that.
kidding, but
Yeah,
not
yeah, cool.
really. So the inception of this book was I had been assigned a freelance article in Double XL maybe like 5 years ago. And I went back to that original email and the editor said, it's 1,300 words, a really light lift. It's going to be super easy. So, I'd interviewed a couple people like stylist Misa Hilton, ASAP Ferg, a few stylists who work with people like Travis Scott. Like it was an easy article. And as I was researching it, I realized that there weren't any books on the subject. Like there were some coffee table books, but nothing really comprehensive. And to me, that sort of uplifted the subject matter in the literary world the way that I felt it deserved to. So I just put that in the back of my mind. Like all writers, we're constantly thinking of ideas like, what's your first book going to be? And at the start of the pandemic, like a lot of creatives, I was forced to sort of take a moment, take a beat, and just figure out what do I want to do next. And to me, a book just made a lot of sense. So this was just like one of the ideas I was kind of kicking around at the time with my then agent. And what's funny, and I've told this before on a few shows, every single person almost passed on this book. Like a lot of editors were not feeling this book. The feedback I got was, we think hip hop is too niche. We feel like fashion doesn't sell. It doesn't make sense in like a literary context. So to me, that's kind of where the villain origin story comes in, because I've always been that person. Like, just tell me no, and I'm going to do it and do it extra hard. Like that always, I love that sort of energy. And, I was very lucky to find an editor, my acquiring editor who was young, who had just sort of this almost like disruptive perspective. And I think I needed that. Somebody who just saw the vision, understood how important hip hop and fashion are to pop culture at large. And, fast forward, the book has gotten like amazing critical press, like best of 2023, all of that kind of stuff. New York Times, New York Mag, Interview, like all those big places have covered it. And also on the sales side, like I'm pushing units and I'm outselling like a lot of people's favorite authors. And to me, this
How
isn't
was
to
that
sort of
thought?
hype myself up, although I do like to hype myself up,
Yeah,
but
how
I
was
just
that?
hope this opens opportunities for other writers, especially within the hip hop space, because we desperately need more diversity. We need, more women, especially women of color writing. So I really hope books like this give other people opportunities, make the advances bigger, make the deal terms better. Because I can speak, again on 2020 at 2020, I never thought that hip hop would be considered niche, but in some rooms it still is. And we have a lot of work to sort of garner that same respect that the establishment gets.
So a reason why I do this show is a lot of my friends are fellow writers, and a lot of us are self-published, and we're trying to get published, things like that. So hearing those rejection stories are motivating for us. They definitely give us
Oh my
fuel.
God, I get rejected on like a daily basis. So as a freelance journalist, I think rejection is just, it's a close friend of mine, where you don't want to see them every day, but there's somebody there. Sometimes, you just have to acknowledge them, show them that love. But if you're afraid of rejection, writing is not the field for you, because that is literally a part of the game. Now, I think one interesting thing about self-publishing, and I know sometimes people can look down on it, but a lot of self-published authors are making way more money than people signed to like the major publishers, because at the end of the day,
Mm,
you eat what you kill. You
yeah.
push 10,000 units, the margins, your margins are better than my margins. So you're making more money. And then you always look at some of these case studies, like a Colleen Hoover, for example, who was self published. And then she got such a crazy fan base that now she can walk in to any major and basically sign the best deal possible. So I would never critique someone for going the self published route. Now, of course, if you want to go through a major, I support you, and that has its own sort of pros and cons. But I don't think there's any, in the same way, I never look down on an artist who's independent, who wants to put out their own music without a major. It just depends, what are you looking for and what works for you.
I've been in the game like 7 years myself writing. Always compared the music game to the book game. Like it's so
Yeah, I think the
parallel
book
to
game
me.
is even crazier than the music game, because like the
Mm,
music game, when you get your advance, you get it up front. We get ours in installments. So imagine getting an advance, I'm making up a number, like 50,000. You don't get it up front. You get a part of it when you sign, a part of it when the manuscript is done. That could take like 2, 3 years, right, for you to write
yeah.
it. Part of it when it gets accepted and published, and sometimes that fourth installment is when you're in paperback, which is a year later. So imagine signing a deal like in 2024, you don't get your full payment until 2028. And that's
I
before
mean,
your agent takes 15%, Uncle Sam takes 30%. So to me, the math of the music business is crazy, but I think in the lit world, it's like something I've never seen.
and out of all my guests thus far, I've never heard anybody break that down like you just did. Like that's crazy.
Oh, we definitely have to talk about it. I think one thing about creative industries, we oftentimes focus on the outliers, right? It's all about who's on the Forbes list, who signed that $15 million advance. And those are great. And I think it's awesome to be motivating and, set an example. But most writers, and I'm talking about like nonfiction in the music space, hip hop space, I'm not talking about like celebrities who do memoirs, right? But you're sort of actual journalists, actual writers. People either got 9 to 5s, they either have rich parents, a rich significant other, or they're doing something on the side that they're not telling us. And to me, I believe in transparency, because you can then make your own decision, right? If I come to you and say, look, Sean, this book, you might end up selling 1 million copies. You're the toast of the town. You win the Pulitzer. Like, you're just winning. It gets turned into a movie. You're a multimillionaire. That may not happen for you. And if not, how do you pay your bills? And as a publisher, that's not our problem. You know what I'm saying? So if you still got to keep your 9 to 5 working at a hospital, please do that. And I want to make, for all the other creatives, don't feel bad about it. Like, as a culture, I think sometimes we shame people, you're not really into it. You shouldn't have a plan B. Like, I get it, because I come from that mentality. And sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't worked, but I never judge somebody. Like, if you got bills to pay, maybe you're a caretaker, you got responsibilities, like, handle your business. Don't ever feel shamed that you got to risk it all to be a writer. Like, to me, that's nonsensical. And a lot of people sometimes saying those type of things don't tell you that their dad bought their apartment, or they got a significant other who's a doctor. So their money is play money. Like, I'm
Man.
all about transparency, because I want people not just to be creatively fulfilled, but also to be fulfilled like financially, and to be able to live the life that they desire.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thanks for that transparent moment. Wow, that was worth the whole interview right there. That was powerful.
Yeah, mic
Um,
drop. So stay with your job, keep writing, keep believing in yourself. Don't do drugs.
um,
I don't know. Stay in school. Like, have a great
yeah,
summer. Yeah.
yeah.
No,
Uh,
and to me, it's not about sort of dissuading people. I want to encourage people, because again, I think a lot of times things like writing or being a creative, they're shrouded in so much smoke and mirrors and secrecy, that I just feel like in this age, transparency is so imperative. And that just helps people make better choices and make the choice that works for you and for your family and for your situation right now. Like at 21, maybe you want to live with 5 roommates in Bushwick. That's cool. You want to be a barista on the side, like you're living that life. At 42, as you mentioned, you're like, I got bills, I got responsibilities. Like, I'm really trying, you're wearing a sweater and a tie, like that costs money. So I can't be expecting in advance I'm getting paid in forts to pay that money. You know what I mean? And
Yes,
then you
ma'am.
can view your writing as a craft. It's a hobby until it isn't a hobby. But in that time, you still are taken care of and you can handle what you need to handle.
Before we transition on this topic, I remember interviewing Dr. Imani Perry years ago about her book called Prophets of the Hood, right? And her South to America had just dropped, winning all these awards, everything going crazy. And I asked her between the two books, what was the major difference? She said it wasn't the actual writing, but the backing that she got from the company to actually put it out there, put it in front of people, put it in all these airports. I mean, whatever went along with that bag. She was able to do that with South to America. She didn't get that for that first book. It wasn't like that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally like the music business, right? So an artist might put out Illmatic, for example. Illmatic wasn't a huge commercial success. I mean, the heads loved it, but it's
Yeah,
not like it had big singles. You didn't hear Illmatic, maybe Radio New York or mix show or college radio, but certainly not sort of so-called crossover radio. Similarly, Reasonable Doubt at the time was Jay-Z's lowest selling album, but
yeah,
we would all say that's a classic, but that was an independent release. So once Def Jam, they kind of garnered their deal there. Now you got that Def Jam promotion, you've got the music videos, we can call Hype Williams and do all those fun things. So, I think the writing, if you focus on the craft, that should be the same every time. Like, I can't imagine wanting to write a book thinking, okay, this is going to garner me awards or this is going to be a bestseller. Like, to me, at that point, just like put that on AI and call it a day, right? And I think you see that even with artists. Like, if an artist is trying to do what's trendy at the time, or, oh, everybody's getting this person for a feature, let me get them. It never feels organic and it rarely sounds good. And it definitely doesn't stand the test of time. So I think art, in my opinion, should sort of stand on its own and you should focus on the craft. But, by the same token, I think authors very much also have to think through a lens of business, in the
yeah,
sense that you also
yeah.
have to be your own marketer,
Come on now,
publicist,
come on.
learn advertising. Like, you got to do all that. Like, even,
The-
you look at a book, so on the back, these are called blurbs. So basically, they're endorsements. So I've got like Dapper Dan, Raekwon, Dan Charnas, Vicky Toback, who are both writers. I had to get those myself, right? So imagine having to hit up like Raekwon's team. Hey, I need this from you, like explaining what it is, when I need it by. You've got to do a lot. I sourced all my photos by myself. I had to do all the clearances by myself. Like, you got to do a lot as an author, especially when you're starting out. Like, I'm sure Malcolm Gladwell doesn't have to do all that. I'm sure Stephen King doesn't have to do all that. But for the rest of us, you have to. And I think understanding that's a part of this game is also important. It's not just you write, hand over a manuscript, and then the machine handles everything. Nah, like, even, a lot of the great media that you mentioned, Breakfast Club, Ebro, Apple, like, I got that on my own. Like, those are my contacts from the
wow,
industry. You know what I mean?
wow,
And even
amazing.
NPR, like, I'm actually about to go do the Los Angeles Times Festival of Books. I pitched myself, like, you got
See,
to be that type of person, right?
this
And
is the more important
everybody,
part.
yeah, I
God,
mean, everybody isn't like that. And I'm very
man,
thankful and blessed, right? Because I came up just in a different sort of trajectory. Like, I didn't go to journalism school. I didn't start as sort of an assistant at a Vibe magazine. Like, I went to business school. So shout out to the Ross School of Business, University of Michigan.
right?
And my first, internship, I was at CNN, then I went to Bad Boy, then I was at American Express. Like, these are all before I even graduated. And then I started at William Morris. So it's now known as William Morris Endeavor, one of the biggest talent agencies in Hollywood. But I started in the mailroom, like the mailroom training program, where you came in and pushed a fucking mail cart. And your dream was to what? Be an assistant, like answer phones and get yelled at. And it's like, yeah, that's literally where I come from. So this idea of being resourceful, in many ways being determined, being assertive. That's in my DNA. But I don't think a lot of writers realize, like, no, no, no. If you want to get these results, you have to do that work. Like, again, you might be lucky, get that one great editor or publicist or publisher who's pushing you. And I've heard, some anomalies who that did happen for them, and God bless. But most people, like, nah, if you're not putting boots to the ground, like, you're not going to get the results, and you're going to be really sad that this incredible book you wrote, like, nobody heard about it.
See, once again, back to regions and everything, me being from Louisiana, that Master P mindset was in my mind the whole time writing my first book. Like, look, I'm about to trunk with it. I'm about to be vending. I'm about to be everywhere I could be. And you said hustling
100%.
with great radio, podcast. I'm trying to call people, like, put myself on your show, whatever it takes to do it. That was in the mindset the whole time. I'm trying to even write the book, let alone whenever
100%.
it
You
drops.
have to. You have to. I mean, ultimately, the goal is you get to a point where you have a team doing this for you and
Yeah,
you become a big priority in the publishing world. But I know people who legit have won Pulitzers who have pulled me aside and been like, yo, my publisher didn't do nothing. Like, you want a Pulitzer, you're at the top of the heap, right? You truly are the paragon. And it's just like any industry. I mean, so many books come out. I get it. They have only so many resources. And things like hip hop, I believe, are still need to be handled by somebody who gets hip hop, right? Or similar with fashion. If you don't understand who is the podcaster to go to, who is the TikTok person to go to, there's a lot of nuance in culture. And I understand a company can't inherently know everything, but I think for a lot of writers, they do get surprised. Like, I'll still go to the post office, mail books to people, like, out of my own author sort of supply. I've sold books out of my own author supply, like off the iPhone. All right, cool. We put in the little square chip and just swipe. So you got to be very determined and very fearless, especially when you're coming out the gate.
yes,
And also
ma'am.
the good part is, you know, if you got a good product, right? Then it doesn't matter. Like, a good product, you should be proud to tell people, "Hi, I wrote this book. I'd love if you would buy it." Like, you shouldn't feel weird about it or I'm too cool to say that. Like, no, this is part of the job. And there's a reason why some of us are doing numbers and some of us aren't. Because if you just wrote the book and said, look, it's out there, whoever buys it, that's cool. But that's not the type of person I am. Like, for me, if this is the first definitive 50-year retrospective, it's drawing a sort of a line in the sand. And if this book does well, and as it continues to do well, that opens other doors for other
Yes,
writers, including myself, right?
yes,
So it has to do well. And you have to have that winner mindset. No matter what happens, where the chips fall, I firmly believe you still go in wanting to win.
yes, yes. So I love this question always, especially for nonfiction books. Tell us about your research process for this book. You mentioned a lot of interviews, a lot of you source a lot of books too. I want to get all those books you mentioned. You source a lot of books. Tell us the research process to write Fashion.
So it was incredibly comprehensive. That It was incredibly comprehensive because I wanted to show, of course, there's interviews citing songs and music videos, old magazine articles and newspaper clips, but I also wanted to make sure that I was going into academic journals. I was looking at even books kind of in a tangential space. So I'm reading Dapper Dan's memoir. I'm reading a book about the history of luxury. I'm, reading Anna Wintour's biography. Like, being very much a voracious just learner. There were times I'd watch a 2-hour Drink Champs interview just to pull like one quote from, or, listening to a podcast or watching a documentary just to get one person's name. Okay, I got to find that person because there's something there. So every chapter had probably about 40 to 50 citations. Like, it was really like going back to college. And to me, again, that just showed that this isn't just a book based upon my opinion or lived experience. Like, there's a lot of research. And I think in nonfiction, that's important because in my mind, I want this book to be prescribed in schools. I want this book to be very much sort of the blueprint that when other people are writing books or papers, that they're citing this. So that means that I have to do my research.
So let me ask you a journalistic question, right? I'm always wondering about this. You're the perfect person to ask. So you've interviewed like these amazing artists, but some of these artists have big egos and personalities and bravado. Like anything can happen or be said in real time. And whenever I see a crazy interview, I'm always thinking to myself, if I had a guest do that, what would I do to get it back on the rails or to kind of, you know. So how do you deal with these situations sometimes as journalists, dealing with some of these crazy personalities, things like that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, every medium is different. So something like, let's say, radio or television has the live element, which I think can be very electric because anything can happen, and it's terrifying because anything can happen. So, that's a very unique sort of circumstance. I think if you're covering an artist, I've been lucky in many times I've gotten actual time and sort of intimacy with the artist. So, sort of like the most basic would be like a phoner. You get like a 10-minute phoner, 15-minute phoner. Imagine that's like speed dating. You meet somebody, you ask some questions, you can't really build no rapport. If it goes great, cool. If it goes terrible, whatever. You both hang up the phone, then you write whatever you got to write. But I've in a couple of, my interviews, I've been able to spend time, sometimes multiple days with the same person. So that's cool too. Like if they're having a bad day on day one, on day two, they might be having a better day. Or in the beginning, I mean, you're a stranger and now you're coming into their home, into their environment. So sometimes they may be on edge or they may be wary. Like I've had some artists, they just didn't talk for like the first 30 minutes. So we're just sitting there in silence. But I don't mind silence. Like, I'm not somebody who feels I gotta fill it in with noise, especially if I know that I've got some time to play with. So it really just depends on the person, it depends on the medium, how much access you have. But one thing is I like to go in with good energy as much as I can. And it doesn't matter if I'm a fan of the artist or if I hate the artist. It's my job to sort of go in without an agenda, with as much of a blank slate as I can. So that's kind of the challenge I give myself. And in fact, some of my best interviews are artists I'm not fans of. Like, yes, if a fanboy or fangirl covers an artist, like, okay, you already knew everything about them. You're gonna write nice things about them. I almost liked it when I would interview people who weren't in hip hop or they're rappers I'm just not a fan of, or even I might have had a negative conception of them and they pleasantly surprised me. So that to me is where the challenge truly is. One of the best pieces of advice I got when I was kind of coming up, one of my big first interviews was Pusha T. And obviously, I'm a huge Clips fan. So this was like a dream. And I had all my questions written down. It's for New York Magazine. I had my questions written down on my phone. Pusha like grabs my phone and he's like, no, no, I'm here, don't look at your phone. The conversation is here. So I'm bugging out. Like I've barely gotten one question in. And now this man is like, don't look at your phone. But that was the best advice. So I don't write questions down no more because to me, that's not a conversation. And it just feels so contrived, right? Let's say we're speaking about, you coming from Louisiana, and then you mention some childhood memory that's really meaningful to you. Now, my next question might be, so tell me about your new book. Like, that's a weird transition. I'd rather go into your childhood because something sparked that got you excited. So my style is much more conversational, but that's where I like that space to breathe. That's just my style. Everybody's different. And
Right.
I think that style works really well, especially in an era now where so many artists are on edge that it's like, gotcha, right? Like you go on the
Yeah.
show, they want that clip, they're going to
Yeah.
cut it up and send it
Yeah.
out. Like I get it. I understand sort of like tabloid journalism, but for like that real kind of meat and potatoes, I think it takes a lot of time and you got to marinate, and both sides come with that good energy and I think you'll get something. But I've definitely had artists who are like, I don't fuck with you, I don't like you, and not anything personal. Sometimes they just don't want a woman interviewing them. Like sometimes they had a bad experience with media and they're just in a bad mood. Maybe their
Wow.
girlfriend dumped them, maybe somebody made fun of them on Instagram. Like I get it, they're human. But the more you do this, and especially as you kind of become more of that OG, you also view people as people. Like everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. Doesn't matter if they're the biggest artist in the world or some no-name artist. And I think when you go in and just treat people like humans, like if you're respectful and cool to me, I'm gonna give that back to you. If you get spicy, I'm gonna get a little prickly too, especially at this stage in my career. But I think as long as we're all professional and we know we're both here to do a job, there shouldn't be an issue.
Wow, you gave me a whole lot as far as myself being in the journalist space, and always have my questions kind of prepared, but I try to be more conversational as I can and go with it as it's going. Like you said, I don't want
I
to
mean,
just
it's definitely harder because, and again, I know everyone's got sort of the talking points they gotta hit, of course, right? But I do feel like oftentimes I've been able to extract things out of interviews. There's no way I could have predicted it, right?
yeah,
When you figure out people's like, what's on their mind, what's going on. I mean, I've had like male artists like cry in front of me. I would never say who, just out of respect for them, but like it
yeah,
got really emotional, it got real. And again, it's also that respect, right? That they know that this is kind of like that safe space.
space.
But, I think every interviewer is different. I like to say women are better interviewers than men. No offense, because inherently I think we listen, and I think
Okay,
especially when the artist is a man or the celebrity, we're not here to compete with them. It's not like we're vying who's the alpha in the room. It's sort of well established. It's sort of like as a guy, I'm sure you've got women who are just like your dope homegirls, like your friends. You love them, you would confide in them. It's that dynamic. Um, but yeah, I would love, again, I want to see more women in this space, women being able to interview and cover male artists. Like these things are meaningful to me because coming up, I saw that. And now I look around the landscape and it doesn't feel that way. So, as someone who's in that position of authority, I want other women to feel like it's safe, it's welcoming, like we need you.
no, I totally agree and co-sign what you just said. And I'm in the sports world along with hip hop, and seeing the amount of women in the female journalist space in the sport world, I'm loving seeing that on all the major platforms. A lot more female athletes are having a chance to be journalists and things like that. So
Yeah,
I
I mean,
love
in my like other life, I would have covered basketball. Like it didn't
okay.
happen, but like in sort of this parallel life, I still joke sometimes, like maybe I'll just leave rap and just go cover basketball. One thing I love about sports, it's probably the last place where there's some objectivity, right? Like it doesn't matter your clout, your followers, what you wore in the tunnel. Like how many fucking points did you put up?
Yeah,
How many rings do you have? I really don't care who you're friends with, who you went to Nobu with, like immaterial. Like it's
yeah,
sort of like Jordan or Kobe, like the Mamba mentality is like we're friends, but I'm going to destroy you. And I
yeah,
love that energy, and I feel in sports it still exists. In
yeah.
hip hop, especially what's going on with Cole and Drake and Kendrick,
Yes,
it's gone away
I
and
love
just
it.
like hurts my little heart because I love the friendly competition. And I think iron sharpens iron, right? So to
Mhm.
me, sports always still attracts me because there's like points and you can't say nothing. It doesn't matter how popular you are, how cool you are, like what numbers do you put on the board? And if you don't put any, or you only play in the game for 2 minutes, like sit down, nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Okay, so let's do this organically. So speaking of sports, so hip hop and fashion definitely go together, but sports and hip hop are always tied together as well. Could you speak on
Oh,
some of the
every
fashion?
rapper wants to be a basketball player. Every ball player wants to rap.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah,
And I would still listen to the Allen Iverson rap album that did not come out. I mean, I'm sure it aged terribly, but like in my mind, I'm still kind of intrigued.
yeah, yeah. But I was gonna ask you about like some of the fashion we have in sports and some of the transition we see in this sports fashion. They're going more to the high end. Guys are doing things now
Oh,
that wasn't really happening.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone went from like Steve Harvey suits to now like
Mhm.
slim fitting Louis Vuitton Pharrell collection.
Yeah.
And look, someone like a LeBron, for example, I think just like loves fashion. He loves to play with fashion, but also athletes are realizing there's money in that. Like if you're the face of like a DKNY or Xenia or something, like that's a really nice check, right? And you can do that in the off season. You might even think, okay, maybe I could transition into doing like some fashion in case I get an injury. Like I get it. There's like money in that as well.
Right.
And I love to see it. I mean, some of like the tunnel fashion is kind of insane, but I like
Yeah.
when guys take risks.
Yeah.
But again, going back to I love though, no matter what in sports, it's still the competition. And your record is your record. And it's great that you got the newest Pharrell, Louis Vuitton, you got Micah Mary on speed dial. That's great. So how many points did you make last night? And I'm just that kind of a person. Like to me,
Yeah.
those things, the competition is what
Yeah.
excites me. And of course, healthy competition, friendly, like keep it all on the court. But that is one thing I really love still about sort of sports that I think in hip hop. I want it to come back. Like in my heart, I hope it comes back.
Yeah.
Obviously the women are very competitive for other
Yeah.
reasons, but among like the
Yeah.
guys, wow, it's just everyone is friends. Like imagine everyone's on the Lakers together. Like how is that fun? Who wants to
Right.
watch that? The entire league is the Lakers.
And I think that rivalry fuels the sport. So that's why the
Of
LSU
course.
versus the Iowa women's game last week was like the highest viewed game like
Yeah.
ever because of the
Yeah.
rivalry aspect of it. And so many times in the guys game now, there are no real rivalries in basketball.
Yeah, we need
Both
some
those guys are
rivalries.
just cool.
People are friends. Mm-mm.
Yeah, you know,
I need
they
that
used to
Rodman energy. I need the Mamba energy. I need the like MJ fuck them kids energy. I need that. Again, be a nice person, leave it on the court, but you should want to be the best. Like I don't know why
right.
you would get into an industry and be like, "No, I'm okay being like the 10th." What?
No.
Like you should aim for one if you end up at 10, that's cool, but like every single person should be your opponent. And the
Yeah.
heroes I grew up with, I mean, Jay, Big, Nas, like it's constantly a debate. Like they would be
Who's the
rapping
best?
against each other on the same song. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you're my brother, but I want to like fuck you up because
Yes.
that's just what it is, right? And you
Yes.
would listen to a song like Brooklyn's
Yes.
Finest or I Love the Dough, and you could feel that,
I'm
And
thinking about
to
that song.
me,
What was the song? It was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
four, three, two, one.
They was going at it on that.
I mean,
And
LL
LL
was
Cool J was
eviscerating Cannibal Cannabis,
yeah,
even though he changed his line because LL is like, no, 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 no. This is my song. I'm going to close the song and show you, young gunner, that I'm still here. And he
yeah,
did. Cannabis responded with second round knockout. But
yeah.
when LL came back with the Ripper, it's like, whoa, wait, this is the doing it guy? This is the guy licking his lips in the Hey Lover video. No, he's LL Cool J. He
LL.
will out rap you at any age because he loves this shit.
Don't get
And
it
I
twisted.
love that energy, and
Yeah,
I think right now we're
yeah.
we're missing that in hip hop. And
I agree.
I think there's a way to do it that's still, positive, friendly. Like, yeah, at the end, nobody should get hurt. No one's, physical sort of safety should come into play. But don't you want to be the best? Like, when did we all just strive for like a participation trophy? Like, fuck that shit. Like, you want to take home hardware.
Right, right, right. I want to ask you a question. You mentioned in chapter two. It's important. It's been on my mind for days now. I never thought about it that way. I want to say the fake it till you make it mindset in our culture, right? A lot of guys had to try to look like they're more than what they are before they even get on, just to get into the room, right? And I think
I mean,
about a
cash
picture.
money millionaires, they're like, we're
I don't know.
millionaires. Are you?
Yeah, right. It was a picture I saw years ago with these billionaires all together at a ball game or something. But like looking at what they're wearing, the point of the picture was like these billionaires are not wearing jewelry, they're not wearing big old bags and labels to the naked eye. And most of our culture is like, we got to show you all the labels. You got to see what I'm wearing. But it's like they could afford to dress down. This is my point I'm trying to
Yeah.
make right now.
Yeah. It's
I
called
never
like
thought about
quiet
it until
luxury.
we can afford to dress down. We got to be the ones our livelihood. Like you said, if you don't go to a meeting and look good, you may not get a job. You probably can't
Yeah.
feed your family. Hard to get a
Yeah.
spouse to have a family. Like we have to do these extra things. But to the outside looking, then you go into the projects. Some of the best cars in the world in the project.
Yeah.
Whenever I drive in the well-to-do neighborhood, I don't see those kind of cars in their driveway.
They drive like a Subaru.
Yeah, and so we feel the need. A person might say, "Well, look what they're doing with their money. They get a little bit of money buying Jordans and iPhones, but we have to have this thing that we're doing to survive."
Yeah.
It's a weird
Well,
dichotomy.
for me, it was very important in the book
Yeah,
early on to discuss the psychology of luxury. So, not just the fact that people in hip hop like nice things. That's a given, and that's extremely, I think, reductive. But why? And whether we know it or not, what are the conscious and subconscious decisions we're making when deciding what we wear? So, there's various facets. And of course, as you mentioned, fake it till you make it. This mentality of whether you want to call it manifestation or
yes,
visualization or
yes.
whatever,
Come on now.
I think the adage is dress for the job you want, not the job you have. So if
That's
you
right.
want to be in the C suite, okay, how do they dress? Okay, they have a suit on. So even though I'm an assistant, let me, put on this suit or a blazer and showcase that I should be sort of next up. But, I think when it comes to people who have been historically either socioeconomically disadvantaged or are dealing with things like racism, sexism, things of that nature, classism, sometimes all you can do to signal worth to the world is like what you have on. Because when you walk into a room, whether you like it or not, like sort of America, for example, will have a lot of stereotypes of who they think you are, right? Based upon you just walking into a room as a 42-year-old guy from Louisiana. If you're dressed wearing a tie and a sweater, oh, he looks like he probably went to college. He must have a good job. He seems like a nice guy. Versus, let's say you dressed with your big no limit chain, which I'm sure you wear at your home in your free time, and your full camo. And that's a
Yeah,
different
yeah,
the way that society receives that. And I think, it's one of those things where historically Black people in this country did not have agency over their bodies. They couldn't decide what to wear. And I went into things like sumptuary laws and dress codes that we see in America. We're going back like 1400s, 1500s, like back in the day. So imagine now you got a little bit of money. Of course, you want to look nice because for society and history has told you, oh, no, 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 you can't look nice. You can't go into that nice store, and it kind of all goes into social signaling and self-worth, and it's very multifaceted, and that's what I wanted to show people. It isn't just the artist gets their advance and like goes to the Louis store. Like he may be thinking that, but there's so much going on psychologically.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, we do, a white person can wear like the dirty sneakers and a crumple shirt, especially like a white man, right? You see this a lot in the tech industry. They're kind of
yeah,
disheveled
yeah,
looking.
yeah.
And you look at somebody like Sam Bankman Fried, he was getting like billions from people. Like, yeah, that kid's got like a lot of attitude. He's going somewhere. If you or I dress that way, a VC would call security. They'd be like, you're not serious. You look disheveled and you need to go outside. Right. So, privilege and sort of
Yeah.
the idea of white privilege and especially white male privilege is very prevalent in this story. And it makes sense. And you can see it in hip hop, especially with, I think, guys like Jay-Z, Dre to a certain extent, Nas, like now that they're in this like billionaires club or multimillionaires club, they dress different. Like they may
Yeah,
have like the nice Audemars, they may have the, Patek on, but they're just wearing like a turtleneck. They're just
yeah,
wearing all black. And this is
yeah.
the notion of quiet luxury because they
That's
don't
right.
have to prove who they are anymore. They walk into a room, that's Jay-Z.
Jay
Like
Z.
he's having drinks with Jeff Bezos. So for him with a huge chain and logos everywhere, like that doesn't fit in that world because
No.
there it's not about, what you're wearing. It's like, oh, how big is your yacht? Where do you summer? Oh, Aspen. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, nice to know. Like they have different currency that they're playing with in those spaces. But I
Yeah,
think before you get to that space, of course, clothes are the first thing people see. It's like your sneakers, they look down and they look up, right? Like from your sneakers to what you're wearing, your
right.
jewelry, like all of that, your accessories, like for women, a handbag. Like maybe you can't afford a lot of nice things in life, but if you can have maybe that one Louis bag or the one Telfar bag, right? And if that makes you feel special and important and beautiful, it's all part of luxury and aspiration. It's very psychological. I mean, the
Yes,
clothing and the goods, I mean, it could be interchangeable, but it's how does it make you feel? What is the cultural connection? What is the community you feel that you're a part of by wearing this?
right. Yeah, thank you very much for that. And like you were saying, there's so many layers to it. On the more simplistic level, we said in the beginning of the show what you wanted to wear in the 90s. Maybe your family couldn't afford to get it, but now we all
Yeah.
grown with our own jobs, and so many of these things are resurfacing again. I couldn't buy certain shoes when they came out in the 90s, but now I got my own money. I'm going to the shoe store. I'm going to get this shoe I always wanted. I can
Yeah.
finally get it. Simple as that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think too, it's again, this idea of signaling. So someone who has a lot of sneakers, you're a sneakerhead. Now you're part of sneaker culture. So
Right?
you see a fellow sneakerhead and you just immediately have that moment. Like I tell people, I have this one Telfar bag. Anytime I carry it, doesn't matter what city, people stop me. Like they don't care about any other brand, but that Telfar has done such a great job of creating this sense of community, a sense of sort of pride and joy and connection that anytime people see you with that, they want to stop you and just like give you props. And again, that goes back to this idea of luxury and, brands. It's all just building culture and community. So by you wearing something, again, whether you realized it this morning when you put what you had on now or not, there's so many little decisions that you made and were also kind of made for you.
Yes, totally right about that. We got to speak about Tommy Hilfiger, man. So when I was in high school, I was the biggest Tommy Hilfiger fan. Me and my best friend Marcus, from the overalls to the coveralls to the underwear, socks, belt, you name it, Hilfiger out. And of course, we was a part of that whole wave where it's like he said in the book, the whole thing go around the world like, man, Tommy Hilfiger don't like black people or whatever they were saying, and we all
Yep.
just like stopped, like
It's
all
a
stopped.
wrap. It's
And
done.
so even in 2024, after everything you said in the book, how so many things came out where it wasn't true, all this press came out. It's funny how misinformation is so powerful. It's still a psychological thing in your mind. I mean, I'm not getting. I haven't had heel figure since. But
Wow.
since your book, when you know better, you do better. I'm gonna get me a heel figure polo like ASAP.
Yeah,
You
I'm
know
gonna need
what I'm
Tommy
saying?
Hilfiger to like send me a shipment or something because I feel like
Yeah,
I have just been dispelling that rumor
you did.
to
You did.
everybody because and it's
You did.
crazy because I think it's called the Mandela effect or something where we all
I
just
heard of
kind of
that.
believe something
Yep.
happened
Yep.
and
That's
it
right.
didn't happen.
That's right.
And to this day, I mean, I was on like a podcast and people were in the comments. Like to this day, I get notifications. No, that happened. I remember it. No, no, no. Oprah came out and said it didn't happen. So, how do you remember a show that Oprah herself said never happened? But people just would hold on to it. And I think, again, that just shows the power of sort of misinformation traveling. And for those of you, just as a quick backstory, in the late 90s, Tommy Hilfiger, a rumor started that he didn't want black people wearing his clothing. And there's different variations of what that story was. But essentially, he had gone on Oprah and made this proclamation. I heard about it in middle school. Again, we didn't watch Oprah, so I don't know how my
Exactly.
best friend heard about
I
it.
don't know how I
You
heard about
know,
it.
yeah, nobody knows
I
how
don't
they
know how I
did.
heard about
So I interviewed Tommy, I interviewed his brother, Andy Hilfiger. And
it. Okay.
essentially, from their research, it started on a college campus, like almost like kind of one of those, was a chain mail. Like somebody would just send out a bunch of emails, like, you
That's
better
right.
forward this. And if you keep wearing Tommy, like, you're a terrible person. They never found out where the origin was. I'm guessing with some bored college student, but can
You
you
know it.
imagine like the amount of backlash they faced? And at the time, they did make statements to the press, but there was no social media. So if we didn't read those newspaper articles or magazine features, we had no clue that Tommy had responded, right? So we kept up thinking that that was true. And fast forward, decades later, there's still some people who hold on to that. And for me, the point of
Crazy.
that was showing just sort of how the internet at that time in those kind of early stages was already affecting hip hop and fashion.
Yes.
And for a brand like a Tommy that's tied, like an eponymous brand tied to one person, how the designer can make or break a line. So if you're hot, you're in the good graces of people, everyone wants to wear your shit. When you're not, it becomes like persona non grata. And then the additional layer is for him as a white man navigating in these spaces, right? And what is that line between appreciation and appropriation? What is the line between sort of co opting versus giving people opportunities? So it's very sort of enmeshed, but no, that was a fascinating chapter. And yeah, to this
Let
day,
me
people come up to me like, why did I give up my Tommy when I could have been wearing it? I was like,
yes,
you
the
should have
whole
read my
time.
book. Yeah.
Let me give some props to the late great Aaliyah right quick, man. Aaliyah, you see Aaliyah rocking
Yeah.
the Tommy, man. So such a classic scene. And you're right. Why do we all start wearing Tommy?
Yeah, and what was great too, so that shoot was sort of styled by Kidada Jones, daughter of Quincy Jones, and she had been working with Tommy Hilfiger kind of as his dot connector because she was very much like an it girl at the time. Many people know that, she'd been dating slash engaged to Tupac before he passed. She was very much like in the know. And they're like, all right, you're cool. We like your style. So she helped style that shoot with Aaliyah, and like that bandeau top is like I think it's like men's underwear. It's not like a part of the collection, but it became so popular they end up having to create it. I think that version might be the created version, but like the original is what you see in that in the original ads where Ali is talking and kind of does this little pirouette. So again, it showed this sort of DIY ingenuity where Aaliyah is a girl, but we're pulling from menswear. We're kind of creating what we think is hot. And it was dope because I think the brand put a lot of trust in Kidada and in Aaliyah to execute. They didn't say, no, 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 we need to put her in only what's available off the rack. Like they understood. And they were one of those brands I think was really good in understanding the power of musicians, working with artists, gifting them clothing. And that ended up paying off for them.
I want to transition to another major label in our childhood, that being Ralph Lauren Polo. As you said in the book, the low. Now, once again, back to regions, I never heard it called the low where I'm from, but totally reading the book, I got the backstory on why they went to the low and things like that. But Polo being a major brand, to the fact of just that style of shirt is called a polo. We
A
all call it a
polo
polo.
shirt
It can be
still.
eyes eye, it can be anything. We gonna say that's a polo, right?
Yeah. Well, I think Ralph Lauren is so intriguing because he, in many ways, reflects the American dream. So he's an immigrant, grew up in New York. He was somebody who, famously changed his last name. Like Lauren is not his government name. And for him to make it as a Jewish designer in American luxury was challenging in the beginning. And I think a lot of artists sort of resonated with that. And polo is just Americana. It's like American heritage. You would look at the ads. It's like horseback riding on your ranch, or hanging out and weekending in the Hamptons, like shit
Right,
that we had
right.
no idea what any of
No,
that meant.
not at
Like
all.
attractive, very attractive people living what was like this American dream. So imagine being somebody like the Lowlifes from Brooklyn, who was a group of kids who basically like stole polo and like would wear it head to toe. Imagine for them, this is their
Yeah,
version of kind of living the American dream.
right.
And of course, in hip hop, we had people like Raekwon, and I mean, just famously rocking polo. Later, somebody like Kanye with like the polo, the pink polo, or like the bear. But it's just been something that's been such a mainstay. I mean, like even to this day, I think polo is just such a great go-to because it really does represent American luxury. And then for a while, there was like that division. Are you a polo head or are you a Tommy Hilfiger head? Now,
Yeah,
Tommy was cheaper. Tommy was cheaper.
yeah.
So
Right,
that did open
right,
it up. And I do
right,
think it also leaned a little younger because they were the big logos. It was a bit more sportier. Whereas
right.
polos, which you might wear if like, you're going into a meeting or doing something a bit more serious. So that was an interesting little rivalry that I think
That's
still
the,
exists today.
yeah, that's the rivalries, the competition. I know when I was in school, certain guys did Nautica only, everything Nautica. You had the polo
Yeah.
guys, heel figure guys. Of course, you had Eddie Bauer and Eyes Eye of the brands, but it was kind of either or. Not many guys
Yeah.
did the whole gambit.
I mean, so I'm not super familiar with Louisiana. So if you saw somebody back then, like how they were dressed, could you tell like what region they were from or what neighborhood? Was it similar to like in New York where different boroughs had like a
You know,
signature style?
the more you saying that, I'm thinking, yeah, because like looking back at old Cash Money and No Limit videos, look at what they're wearing. It was things that we all thought we could all get.
Yeah,
Oversized t-shirt from Walmart somewhere, a pack of white t-shirts,
a bandana.
Jabot
Yep.
jeans, bandana. They're wearing like Reeboks or like a shoe we could all get, right?
Yeah,
And the other
Juvenile
part
said
of
he went from
Louisiana
Nikes to Reeboks.
is that. But everything
Yeah.
that they're talking about and wearing is stuff that we all feel I can go and get that. Now, of course,
Yeah.
as they get bigger, now they're talking about foreign things and Japanese brands, and it's like, okay, here's something different.
Yeah.
But in certain parts of Louisiana, you could kind of sort of tell a guy's kind of where he was coming from with it.
Yeah, and I think that was something I mentioned in the book very sort of unique about the South, where there was kind of this democratic aspect where everybody just wore this super XXL t-shirt, some jeans, you throw on, maybe a bandana, a little bit of jewelry, maybe like some gold, some grills, but it felt more accessible. And I could see that maybe that was also a response to kind of what was going on in like New York. Because by then, Puff's wearing Versace, everybody is like, Coogee down to the socks. And it's like not everybody can live that life. So I could see someone like a Cash Money. I remember so distinctly that Juvenile Ha video where it's like, no, no, this is just regular. And I could see
Regular,
that really resonating with people. Yeah.
yes. Because keep
Whether
thinking
it
about
was conscious or not. Yeah.
even the vehicles they're describing in the songs is not like something you can't get vehicle. So you a guy
No.
where you a guy driving a Cutlass Caprice, or you driving an Eddie Bauer Expedition, and you playing the song, you singing it because I'm driving a car. But
Yep.
whenever it gets elevated, and now you driving something I can't even pronounce, I can't get it, and so we as fans
Panamera.
feel like
Yeah.
you fell off or you out of touch. You just
Yeah.
elevated, we just not there economically. So it's like I can't
And
relate to
that's
driving that. I
an
can't relate to
interesting
living over there.
convo people have now. Like, are artists sometimes rushing to get the most expensive shit to the detriment of building a fan base? And I just wonder, I'm just kind of thinking out loud. From jump, you're already telling me you signed an eight-figure deal, you wear the most expensive clothes, you're on a private jet, like you got one song. And I do wonder maybe that's why certain artists don't have that grassroots fan base because we didn't come up with you. Like in many ways, like we came up with a lot of artists, but if from jump you're already here, there's nowhere else to go than down.
I want to definitely hit on the Tyson baseball part of polo because for
Mm,
me, as a young black man, back to what you said about the ads that we were seeing at the time, I'm not really subconsciously resonating with any of these ads. But a
yeah,
guy like Tyson Beckford, who for a lot of us felt like you said in the book, he wasn't the first black man to be in the ads, but
right.
he seemed like
Yeah.
one of us in the ad.
Oh,
A guy from the
100%. I
block,
mean,
a guy
Tyson
from the
was
hood,
like,
like
yeah, he was a hip hop guy. He actually was sort of tangentially down with like the low lifes. I think I mentioned in the book, like he was, yeah, gorgeous, incredible look, but also sort of very masculine. At the time, people talked about him being, a brown skinned gentleman, having a shaved head. Like that wasn't really seen within sort of the high fashion world. So he did represent this kind of hip hop beauty in a way, right? And being sort of that paragon of what a masculine young guy from a place like New York looks like. And what's crazy, he was discovered by the Source magazine. So it kind of goes full circle. Like he truly is a hip hop supermodel. And it was the Source magazine had put him in some things. And then that kind of kickstarted. He ends up going to like a go see with Ralph Lauren, and the rest is history. But I kind of, you wonder had the Source not sort of seen that potential, would we have ever gotten a Tyson Beckford?
and back to the athlete conversation, right? Would you think or would you say that Tyson, being the way he is, he kind of sort of broke the door down for the athletes and the rappers to start wearing this
Yeah,
fast fashion stuff
100%.
because it's like they have proof of product, right? We know for a fact we can get a guy like this to wear this thing and it works. People like it, they love it. Like Tyson was the one that kicked down the door for all of it.
Well, if you remember right around that time, like Tretch was modeling, and I believe, and don't quote me, I think Tretch and Tyson were both repped by Beth Ann Hardison, like super OG Black woman in the fashion space. But I could totally see casting agents being like, "Can you get us another Tyson? Like he might be a little too expensive. He might be booked with Ralph." And then you see Tretch, and he has, very kind of similar sort of physical features. And on
Yeah.
top of that, he's like a hit artist. Oh yeah, we need him.
And of course,
And then
Tupac
later
had
people like, yeah,
Tupac had
Tupac,
the appeal
Fredro
Tupac had,
Starr, of
the
course.
allure,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I talk about in the book, a lot of people don't realize right before he passed, Pac walked in a Versace show in Milan. And I have a great picture in the book of Pac taken on the streets of Milan. And I interviewed the photographer who took it. And all the fashion guys would just talk about how beautiful his eyelashes were. Like, apparently, very long and luscious eyelashes. But Versace was another brand that Gianni and then later Donatella, they understood the power of celebrity. So, you know what? We might need Madonna at this table and Mike Tyson and Tupac. Like, it doesn't matter if someone's kind of scandalous or polarizing, good. We want them. And
you want
later
it.
you saw that relationship with like Donatella and Little Kim. So it's really this idea of Versace was this brand that just loves celebrities. And now we're used to celebs in the front row, but it
Yep.
didn't used to be like that at Fashion Week. It was actually, retailers, buyers, editors, they were the ones who were watching fashion shows. Like celebs, why would you come here? But now it's like if a show doesn't have a celebrity, people are disappointed.
And you do a great job with your journalism. Once again, showing something I didn't realize that as a child when it was happening in real time. But like your Tupac Shakur going to Milan story, phenomenal story, right? But like I never realized in my mind when I think Versace, I don't think Tupac. Like the biggest small
Yeah.
part, I get it. I don't think Pac was Versace. But then you broke it down the whole thing, and then the Haitian Jack part of it and everything like that.
Well,
The
also
gangster
in Hit 'Em Up,
influence,
like
yeah,
Pac comes after Biggie for Versace. Like people forget that line because it's kind of buried, right? Obviously, the lead of that song is the headline, but no, Pac really felt like that Big stole his style. And then if you read the book, it's very much we're not sure where which kind of came first, like who put Versace on first, because I think Biggie saw Puffy wearing it. That's what Puff says. But
right.
then Haitian Jack was like a street guy, very notorious in New York, was like, no, 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 Pac saw me wear it and he wanted to emulate me because he wasn't a street guy. So I was wearing Versace before Pac was. And that became a little sticking point with him too. So it's interesting the who wore it first has always been a point of contention in hip hop. But again, it goes back to the competition, right? Like this idea of I'm a better rapper than you. I dress better than you. I had relations with your wife. I mean, it's all a part of the diss, right?
Yeah, competition, competition. So I don't want to strong arm your time. I want to ask you a question before we get out of here. Your next book, I normally ask my guests, what you working on next? Well, with you, we know you're working on the Rockefeller book. We see your posts. I love what you're posting and what you're doing with that. Tell me, out of all the rap dynasties they could have had, why your focus on the Rock?
Rockefeller is the dynasty. And it's funny, the label was only around for 10 years. So like 94 to '04 is the rock as we sort of know it. But it's a hip hop blue chip company. Like this was the only label that spawned multiple bosses, multiple businesses in all facets of entertainment. And to this day, if I tweet or share anything about Rockefeller, the excitement and emotional response that comes around, and I feel like because I'm like, a super rock fan, but no other label elicits that response. So it's also to me, I want to
You
share
don't
the
think
history.
you don't think
Pardon?
Death Row like that? You don't think Death Row get down like that? The West?
No, because if you really think about it, that label, what once it dissipated, with the exception of Dre, I mean, yeah, Snoop is around, but it wasn't sort of like every artist on Rockefeller seems to have that entrepreneurial leaning to them, right? Even some like Cam having a sports podcast. Obviously, Kanye is like a giant in and of himself.
Yeah.
And then Rock Nation, like it's The Rock is sort of like The Rock is forever. These are the names you know, but even behind the scenes of the industry, executives, like so many people started as interns there, started street team there. Like it is one of those companies that, and again, we're going to find out. This is the process of discovery why that is, and specifically what are the business lessons we can learn. Like that's kind of what the thesis is all right. So if Rockefeller is the greatest hip hop label. Why and what can we glean from that? So that's sort of the overarching hypothesis
I can't
or
wait.
thesis.
I can't
Yeah, I
wait.
mean it's funny. Everybody's hitting me. I'm like, guys, I just signed the deal. Like I just am starting the research
Yeah.
process. But if
Let
anybody out
me
there is Rock affiliated, please hit me because I'm talking to like everybody.
let me invite you for an interview first. You heard it here first, everybody.
Oh boy.
When they come out, I'm inviting you right now. Come back.
Oh boy, thank you. Thank you.
Uh,
Yeah, no, I think it'll be good. And again, this goes back similar to Fashion Killa. You know, like again, a lot of people in publishing didn't get Rockefeller. They're like, we don't get it. And I'm like, you know what? It's not for you. It's not for you. But that's why it's so important that more people from hip hop are in the lit game because that's how these stories get told. Otherwise, you just get another history of hip hop book, another like boring memoir that nobody cares about. Yes, shots fired. I don't care. A coloring book. Like that's what you get because the powers that be, like they don't get it, right? Like when I say Rockefeller, like you get so excited. It brings back memories, people want to debate it, what happened, like it still sparks that excitement. But if
yeah.
you didn't come from that, it means nothing to you. Like I don't get it. You know what I mean? So I think again that goes back to our earlier point. Representation is so important. And in this case, the editor I signed with, like from jump, he was super excited and he's like, no, let's go, let's go, let's go. And that's the energy I like. Like for me, as I work with different collaborators now, I just want people who are like disruptors, who are visionaries, and they just like get it. You know what I mean? And they want to win. They want those championships. So I love that energy. But yeah, so right now we're still promoting Fashion Killa. You can get it at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, everywhere you buy books, the library. Like if you get it at the library, you can still, share a photo. I'd love to shout it out. And
Yeah.
yeah, after that, it's The Rock. So
Right.
Rockefeller coming from Simon and Schuster in a few years, let me get to writing.
Okay. So on the hot seat before you leave, your top five, dead or alive. The classic question: top five dead or alive.
Is this an order? Okay. All right, that takes the pressure off. So definitely Big J, Nas, and this gets a little bit controversial, Jeezy and Jadakiss.
I've never heard Jeezy on anybody.
No, no.
Never in my
To
life.
me,
I'm a
Jeezy's
Jeezy
voice
fan.
sounds like no, I'm a huge fan. Jeezy's voice sounds like God.
Jeezy voice
I
sounded like God.
like God. Like to me, when I heard Jeezy's voice, like whose voice sounds like that? And I remember when I
Oh,
interviewed him, I told him, I'm like, if my voice sounded like yours, my life would be like 87% better. And he was beyond confused and started laughing. But and he's not like a traditional rapper by any, stretch of the imagination. But something about his voice is just so cinematic, and
yeah,
again, I just love
yeah. Powerful.
it's powerful.
Powerful.
And then of
Powerful.
course sort of what he was
Yeah,
doing, with like the
yeah.
snowman and just sort of like that
Quick.
trap music
Let me
era,
tell you.
I think was incredible.
Let me tell you. I was living in the ATL whenever he was on this trajectory. Him and Gucci Man kind of.
Yeah,
I was never a Gucci Man fan at all. But Jeezy,
yeah,
they would play the entire Jeezy album in the club, not a track. Like put it
just
on
a
and
whole
let it go.
album.
And we
Yeah,
don't care. Like
we don't
let it
care.
go on repeat.
Yeah,
Talk about
I
good
mean
time.
Recession is one of my favorite albums of all time. I love that album. That's a great fucking album.
So there might be a Jeezy book down the line.
I mean, I'm not. I mean, he put out his memoir, and I'm not going to be
Yeah,
mad. Like, there was a
he
part
did.
of me that wanted to hit him, like, sir, like, come on, that should have been me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, all love to Jeezy. If he wants to work on
yeah.
the
Sure,
next one, please hit me because I'm a huge fucking fan.
sure.
No, I mean Jeezy, Jada, again, those are like kind of my wild card slots, but you know, I have to have them on there just because for me, those are like my guys.
So who do you like now? Is always the trick question. That's the classic, classic guys. Who do
Here's
you
the
play
problem.
now?
If you go on my Spotify, it looks like I live in 1998.
Me too.
Like I've
Me
got,
too.
you know, I'm like fucking listening to like Mob Deep. I'm listening to, you know, if I was listening, what was I listening to? Fucking like Most Def, you know, Gangstar. Like in my mind, I live in 98. So apologize.
Yeah,
Of course I have
yeah,
to be on top of what's coming out now. I
yeah.
did
Sure.
enjoy the Danny Brown album that came out, Quarenta. And I'm from Michigan, so of course, you know, shout out to Danny Brown. I think JID is really dope. I saw him live and was very impressed. And again, I went in with like blank slate. But if we're talking about like this big three, right now Kendrick's on top. Like nobody's fucking with Kendrick. He's the king. And if you're gonna forfeit, then you know what? You're out of the big three. So Kendrick's on top. I would love to see, and I put this out on Twitter right before we came here. I'm like Nicki. I'm not a Barb, I'm not a Nicki fan like that.
I
But if
love
Nicki
Nicki.
wants to come for like that big three,
I
she's
love Nicki.
well equipped.
Love
And
Nicki.
she's of the same generation.
No,
She's got the like lyrical
ability. Yes,
dexterity. She's
yes,
got the hits.
yes,
Like if Nikki wants to
yes.
come and take that crown, I would again. She's got me blocked on Twitter for some reason.
Are you
But
serious?
I still, yeah, it's weird. But
That's
I think
crazy.
Nikki could be great.
Yeah,
And I would also love like a brand new person. Like sometimes in an industry where things become sort of stagnant and boring, it's the perfect time for a young gunner to come out of nowhere. Like I would love some random artist from Louisiana we've never met to just come and go fucking scorched earth, you know? Like in my mind, I'm thinking like when 50 came out with Ghetto Quran or came out with How to Rob, like just come in and fucking take that spot. Like I love that energy. Again, it goes back to the competition. Make it clean, keep it on the court. But I think now is the perfect time for a young person, a young artist to come in and just claim the crown. It's yours for the taking.
yeah. We spoke on like the book game and the music game earlier. I tend to like most artists before they sign with a major label, like the early Nicki. I love early Nicki. I love early 50. I love early Drake. Like I love most guys and they got that hunger and that competition and they
Yeah, and I think
show
it's
that.
different, right? Because the minute you come, not so much now, but like back when all of them came out, once you became signed, you got to make songs. So that was hard for a lot of people. You saw a lot of like battle rappers, especially, really struggle. So you look at somebody like Cassidy, for example, like he can rap, but I
Yeah,
think it was hard for him to make songs and
yeah. The whole
songs
hotel thing. Good to my
yeah, or you know,
sister.
I'm a hustler, where like the
I'm a
Jay-Z
hustler.
sample kind of takes over him, right? I would throw even like cannabis into that. Like he could rap. I don't
Yeah,
think he could make songs. And that's really tricky, you know? Like
it is.
you can be a great rapper, but can you make records? Can you make records that resonate beyond just the core fan base? Now it's a little different. I mean, you could just super serve your niche and just call it a day. But before it was like, yo, you want to be on the radio, you got the club record. Do you have the
Track
record
for the
for the
girl.
ladies? Oh
Back.
my God. When people say that now, I still just want to like punch them in the face. No violence, but I want to punch them in the face. Like music isn't gendered. Everyone can like everything, but it's true. And that's how A&Rs would talk. Like, I need a song for the women. What does that mean? A song with like melody, basically, is what it means, a hook. So a lot of artists weren't able to do that. So I think that becomes tricky when you hear earlier work. It's more like that rough kind of the scratch, and then you listen to sort of like the studio album, and sometimes it can be great because you get the A&R, you get the producer, you get a budget, and other times it can be a disaster.
So a few years ago, even last year, they had another list came out, like the top 25 rappers or something. And so me and my friends always debating because my favorite guys just don't tend to make radio hits. I like battle
Yeah.
rap guys. I like very lyrical guys. It doesn't really transfer over like you just said. So My
And
homies like,
hits
well,
are
bro,
one metric. Like, again, not everyone can be Jay-Z, who's like, I can battle, but I can also, rap off the dome and I can give you record. Like, that's rare, right? Jay and Biggie, like they're rare unicorns in the game. Most people don't fall into that. And I think that's okay. Like, I don't need Most Def to give me a radio record. That Black Star album is fucking great. I don't need
yeah,
Wu Tang to. Like 36, yeah, there were singles from that project, but it doesn't matter. It's fucking Wu Tang. Like, to me, that's the greatest like rap group.
yeah,
With Outkast coming in also as a possible, but I have bias to New York, obviously. But yeah, I think
right,
it is one metric, hits and sales, and that
yeah.
is something in the
And
industry, of course, we
once again,
watch. How can we
see
not?
how many brands you have at the Fashion Killa, brands and
Yeah,
makeup lines and
yeah,
bags and like, come on,
yeah. And
let's not
nowadays,
come on
everybody wants to be on
board.
the Forbes list. And in fact, Forbes, their recent billionaire list, Taylor Swift was the only artist on there who made her money solely in music. Because
Wow.
everybody else, and it came from brand extensions. And I'm not mad at that, but it is quite intriguing that she's the only one that, due to touring, that was what drove her for the first time into the Forbes list.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
But thank you very, very much for your time. Thanks for everything you did. Anybody watching this show now or later, go out there and get the book. You a hip hop head, you a fashion head, 80s, 90s babies. You're gonna love it. Go and get it. Support the system, man. Thank y'all very, very much for the Sean P experience. I have another show tomorrow evening. Thank y'all very much. I'm out. Peace.